Okay, well, good afternoon, and I'm so glad you guys found your way here in the waning hours of Red Hat Summit. Are you guys all sticking around to go to Weezer tonight? Yeah, going to the party? Okay. I hope you've had a good time here and you've learned some new things. And my name is Mary Turner. I'm Director of Management Software Business Unit Evangelism. I joined from IDC, which is a market research company. I came to Red Hat about 9 months ago. And I spend most of my time working with our enterprise customers and the analyst community. And we spend a lot of time talking about kind of where is the future of IT operations going, and how are all the things happening with DevOps and digital business and hybrid cloud, how are they going to impact what IT operations teams have to do in the future. And that's what I really wanted to talk to you about today. What we're talking about are 5 factors that I think about a lot when it comes to thinking about the future of IT operations and the impacts that those have on IT operations roles and skills and tools. Then we also want to talk a little bit about how that changes the way we think about architecting the management solutions and creating hybrid management environments that really do a great job of on-prem, do a great job of public cloud, and of putting it together. And then we want to talk about Red Hat's management and automation vision. And I apologize that this is going to be like a slow-mo roll through here, but it's the best we could do. So the 5 factors I want to talk about, and some of these may be familiar to you, but digital transformation, DevOps, the rise of the developer, and business. And that causes a lot of challenges around just speed and friction, and the notion of DevOps, that we're going to collaborate between IT ops and development at the same time that IT people are often getting less and less connected to infrastructure. So for IT ops teams, you guys have to keep security and compliance and performance, and in a development model, maybe it's okay, but at some point as you scale and run production in hybrid clouds, there's a lot of policy and automation that goes into keeping up with this digitally driven business in a hybrid environment. And that's another thing that we're definitely seeing is the move to hybrid cloud. And people always say, well, what do you mean by hybrid cloud? We have a pretty definite view that says, most of our customers are running bare metal, running VMs, running on-prem private clouds, and probably running multiple public clouds. And that's a real challenge, right, to keep consistent operational policies, security, compliance, figuring out how to drive containers and Agile into these environments while maintaining all the older stuff. We're also seeing the increasing use of what I call advanced automation. I think most of you have had automation in your environments for years and years and years, but it's often been very siloed. It's been very specific to different devices and systems and operational roles. And what we're finding in these more agile, digitally driven businesses and these hybrid infrastructure and next-gen architectures like containers and microservices and serverless is that automation's got to become more ubiquitous and consistent across all the roles. And so we're seeing things like Ansible stepping up and providing a consistent automation orchestration platform that can go across network and storage and CICD and public cloud. And that's really going to be the future of IT ops, I think, a very programmable, software-driven environment that's more consistent across all the silos. And finally, AI ops, or I think AI is aspirational in many cases today still, but a lot of predictive analytics, a lot of machine learning, and really thinking about just this cascade of data that we get from everything that's managed, right? Whether it's, again, a CICD tool chain or an OpenShift container platform or network or public cloud. There's just so much data, logs, metrics, performance that just comes in. And how do we deal with it? Where do we manage that data? Where do we process it? Where do we centralize it? How do we normalize it? And how do we, most importantly, take action on it? So I think you're going to see a lot of investment and innovation in this space in the next couple of years. And for IT ops, it's going to be how do we take that predictive analytics and machine learning and really start to act on patterns rather than just act on individual events in the context of this rapidly evolving infrastructure and the abstraction away from infrastructure control, right? As we go to more public cloud, it's harder and harder to turn the knobs and dials on the computers, and you can't always see the lights flashing, but you still got to apply a policy-driven approach and you know, protect the information, protect confidentiality, manage costs, and all the things that are really the mission for IT ops. You know, that's a big transformation too, is, you know, it's about policy and goals and that kind of thing, and not just about keeping the lights on. So that's the kind of things that we talk about with folks a lot. On the digital business side, you may have seen some of these statistics, but it's really pretty staggering. With something like 2.1 trillion is what IDC is estimating will be spent in 2019 on digital transformation technologies. And 2/3 of CIOs in the Global 2000 have digital transformation at the heart of their corporate strategy. And 85% of leaders of those Global 2000 say they're going to try to leverage digital transformation. So that's a lot of change. And it's, you know, not just putting up, you know, great e-commerce like maybe it was, you know, 10 years ago. It's about fundamentally rethinking how business processes operate, how to take advantage of data, how to leverage all these interesting cloud services that are coming along, and how to ensure that the time to market, you know, gets faster and faster and with less and less friction. So what that means, though, is developers, you know, obviously are playing a really important role. But even the profile of developers is changing. And I think this is really important for IT ops because traditionally we've had, you know, rather structured, clearly professional, dedicated developers driving a lot of applications. In fact, IDC tells us there's something like 600 million applications out there, just, you know, some staggering number. But what's happening is that the rise of low-code and no-code and part-time and amateur developers are becoming more and more important. And IDC in the same study said 30% in the next couple of years, 30% of applications that are running in enterprises are going to come from these sort of non-traditional low-code, no-code, you know, part-time and more, you know, more consumer-oriented style development. So that's a lot. That's a lot of applications. It's going to be even faster growth of this in Asia in particular. And what that means is that developers are going to have less and less sophistication about what infrastructure needs to look like. You know, we sort of had this model, I think, early on of DevOps and cloud and self-service that we assumed that developers knew quite a bit, right, about, you know, I need this much memory, I need this much CPU, I need these kind of VMs, I need it for this long, I need it, you know, and increasingly, particularly in the low-code world, they may not know a lot. They may say, you know, I need an environment, and I'm going to work on it till I get done with this sprint, and then I want it to go away. And so the layers of, again, sort of policy and control and standardization and automation underneath that all are going to become more and more important because we can't rely on developers, you know, also really being system admins. And so I think that's something that I'm not sure a lot of organizations have really started to recognize yet because the development cycles are still changing so much. We've still got waterfall and agile, and now we're working on containers, and we're trying to think about microservices, and we're thinking about serverless. And you know, I went to, actually, one of my colleagues from Red Hat did a talk yesterday, and it was really interesting to think hard about things like microservices and serverless and, you know, the whole DevOps culture, which is you do sprints, you do MVPs, you throw stuff out, and you know, understanding that you've got to, microservices require boundaries, but you can't set boundaries till you know what the application looks like. So, you know, at what point do you go to microservices, and then at what point, and what kinds of processes really can take advantage of serverless, you know, versus not being suited for serverless. So there's going to be kind of a whole different conversation, I think, that developers are going to want to have with the operations teams, and it's going to be as much about helping us be good consumers of all the different kinds of infrastructure resources and cloud services that are out there in a way where we don't even have to think about it. And so I think IT ops teams are going to be challenged to, you know, think more like programmers. I think that's one of the fundamental changes that's happening, and it's going to kind of ripple across everything. We're seeing it, I think, already in the automation space with the move to programmable infrastructure as code and automation orchestration. But you're going to see it other places too, as developers become less sophisticated about what it means to run and control IT. And in that kind of environment, it's really hard to believe that unless you automate it and enforce it with policy, the developer is even going to know what they're doing, protecting personal data and conforming with GDPR and all the other kinds of security things that are really important to make sure that information that's touched in the development process doesn't go places where it shouldn't go and is compliant with all these things that you've signed up for. So I think that IT ops teams, have to kind of track what's going on with the sophistication of the developers and how do we sort of automate and abstract a way to keep the risk profile appropriate in the organization, even as we move faster. So, on top of that, so that's sort of the developer side. Now we got the infrastructure side, right? And we've got hybrid cloud, all these different footprints. Seems like there's another footprint every day, right, now with containers and serverless. And pretty much every company I talk to comes in and says, we're committed cloud first, cloud first. We don't want to build any more new data centers. Do you guys say that? No new data centers? Anybody in here? I talk to a lot of people that's the philosophy. At the same time, though, we have to protect the data, and we have all these existing applications that are not well suited for cloud, and it's becoming very, very hybrid. And the reality is, I think any significant size enterprise with existing applications is going to be running a very hybrid architecture for a very long time. 58% in this 451 research study said they're moving to a hybrid environment that specifically was defined as integrating on-prem and off-prem solutions. And so that's the challenge. If we assume we've got more abstraction between the developers and the infrastructure, we've got more hybrid cloud going on, we've got to have an approach to management that lets us do a great job on-prem and a great job in the cloud. And what we're moving towards, and you're going to see this over the next few months and year at Red Hat, is we're really looking at how we take some of our more traditional monolithic solutions like a cloud forms or even a satellite and sort of modularize them, include more APIs, break up the monolithic code, develop faster, and take advantage of SaaS delivery models as well. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we get done. But we're finding SaaS delivery is really gaining ground, in many industries. I'm sure, you folks who've, across your organizations, you must have a number of SaaS solutions, whether it's, a Salesforce or a ServiceNow or whatever, New Relic. I mean, there's so many choices out there. 451 tells us that 32% of businesses actually expect SaaS to be their largest growth area for IT spending in the coming year. And we've really recognized that as you may or may not be aware of Red Hat Insights, but that's our first SaaS management solution. And it's been commercially available a little over a year. The ability to innovate and add new features and get them out is so much faster, built on containers, built on OpenShift, running in the public cloud. It's really kind of revolutionized the way that we think about developing a lot of our management capabilities. And rather than forcing our customers to go through a Satellite 5 to Satellite 6 upgrade and all the stress that involved, we're looking at where can we take advantage of SaaS delivery models. And usually when I have that conversation with people, the first thing they say is, well, we're kind of worried about sharing data. We don't like to share our management data. We want to keep it all in-house. We've worked really hard on that. We've looked at how to anonymize data, how to be very specific about the kind of data we select to share with the SaaS service. We've give customers an opportunity to opt out on different kinds of data. And so, as you think about how do you sort of move to this hybrid operational model, thinking about working with folks that understand the value of your data and can give you some control over it, and also the ability to roll it back if it ends up not being what you want, is going to be another sort of important skill. Thinking about how do we manage these SaaS delivery and the data that's driving it, because fundamentally it's about the data at the end of the day. You can take the logs, you can take the events, you can take whatever policies you've got, and you can move them from system to system as long as you sort of understand really what the data is and where it's going. So abstractions around programmability, around being really aware of data, kind of taking this whole conversation of what IT ops does and say, yeah, there are places where we still got to provision and patch and keep the lights on, but at the same time, we're really kind of shifting where the value conversations are going to be. And this just kind of reinforces what I said. The application profiles change slowly. Even by 2020, the surveys that we do show that at least 40% of enterprise applications are going to be very traditional, running on traditional infrastructure. For some organizations, it's going to be much higher than that. So it's a slow wave of change, which means you can't just kind of, hope if you close your eyes for a year that you can wake up into a whole new world. It's going to be an evolution, and it's going to be a tools evolution, a data evolution, and a skills evolution for a lot of folks in IT ops. So hybrid's going to be the norm. I don't think I need to, beat that too much, but it really ripples across all the organizations. The other thing I wanted to mention is just this shift to what I think of as next generation infrastructure. And for many of your organizations, this is probably, the new edge. You're just trying to think about what does it really mean for us. But some things to keep in mind. You're going to hear more and more, obviously, about containers, but also about immutable infrastructure. And that really conjures up a couple of different requirements just in some very traditional processes like provision and patch, because in a container and immutable type environment, you don't patch running systems, right? You rebuild the container and you then reapply, you kill the containers that you're replacing and you put out the new ones. What that means is that the content in those containers and in those immutable profiles becomes really important. Do you trust the content? Do you validate the content? And this is going to include, content that comes from open source communities, it comes from third parties, that your own people are working. If you've got a container, and Red Hat obviously has our trusted container registry, and the CoreOS people can certainly talk to you about what they're doing with their registries. But pretty much, every piece of software that runs in these more modern environments you're going to have to know where it came from, and there's going to have to be a concept of kind of source control and unit test and all the things that they do on the development side. We really have to start putting that same kind of capability into the IT ops side as we move to more software control and immutable architecture. So early days, but it's a good thing to start thinking about. And again, sort of, the event-driven roles of serverless computing. Serverless is going to be really interesting. It's going to, for certain use cases, it's going to increase utilization, and it's going to help manage your consumption of public cloud, but not every workload. It's not like it's not going to be, so we went from VMs to cloud to container and serverless, and we just go and we drop the old stuff. It's really going to be very selective based on the nature of the workloads and what you're trying to do. Containers are going to become an important part of the whole workload portability conversation. And so there's just a new vocabulary, I think, that many organizations are going to have to learn and kind of dig down and understand, from an application performance point of view, what are the pros and cons of each of these kinds of next generation infrastructure, and then, what does it mean to run them and manage them and keep them compliant in an operational environment. So some interesting conversations, I think, over the next couple of years. But like I said, IT ops, it's going to be source control, it's going to be programmability, and it's going to be analytics. I think I already talked a little bit about this idea that we move to almost a CICD sort of pipeline for automation, for analytic code, for sort of anything we do. But think about trust and think about source validation, because that's going to be important. And then the other thing I like to talk to people about is intelligent automation. This is the idea of taking automation, which is a great thing, and marrying it up with analytics, because that's really where the power is going to be. And we've seen this already when we take what we have with satellite. And you may have seen a demo the first day of the show where we sort of showed, there were like 3 different places, and there was a configuration problem, and so workloads weren't getting sent to Amazon. They were all going to Azure, and then, we magically did some stuff on the stage, and suddenly it all balanced out. Well, what was behind that was things like satellite, which has a lot of information about configuration and subscriptions and the kinds of things that you've done for a long time with satellite. And then our Insights platform, that SaaS offering I talked to you about, which could go out and do predictive analytics and understand where the configuration problems were. And then the third part of that was the generation of Ansible playbooks to actually remediate in real time the whole problem. So that kind of, right now it's still a little bit separate. We're moving these kind of things closer and closer together so that there's a kind of a seamless life cycle of monitoring, analytics, automation, remediation, sort of life cycle control. And a lot of that is coming, this intersection between analytics and automation. And it's coming at a good time because people are telling us that 86%, which is pretty much everybody, thinks that automation is mission critical or important for their cloud strategies and for DevOps. And 79% of organizations think they need something new. What they've got in-house isn't going to cut it as we go through all these transitions. So I think that intelligent automation, intelligence plus automation, is going to be an important conversation. The automation piece, again, we think Ansible, just based on the uptake and the activity in that community, has really set an example of how organizations can move to a much more programmable, software-driven approach to automation that's consistent across the silos. And I think that's really important to remember is that it's helpful, I guess, if you can automate individual silos. It's better than doing everything manually. But where the power is really going to come in this very fast-moving, changing world is going to be if you can orchestrate automation so you can say, all right, I need to update something, but there's a whole lot of things and a whole lot of silos you've got to cross to update an application or to automate a new rollout. You've got to you've got to take the system, you've got to shut down the app, you've got to shut down the system, you've got to take it out of the load balancer, you've got to do whatever updates you're doing, and then you've got to restore it and rebalance, and it's a whole set of cycles. And if you can do all of that with one consistent software-driven approach to automation that touches all those different pieces, it's going to be way faster and way more repeatable than if you've got to have each individual silo automate on its own. So that's what, if you haven't looked at Ansible, that's the kind of thing that it's really trying to do, is create a very lightweight, human-readable approach to programming automation across all these different operational domains. And because it's in a human-readable format, it's very easy to document. And from a skill point of view, because people get concerned about the skills, something like an Ansible, you don't have to be a developer to take advantage of it. There's a lot of content, which you have to decide that you trust it, and we're helping with that. There's a lot of content in the communities, but then to write, you need to know a little bit of Python or PowerShell or something to write a module, but to actually use the playbooks and to run the playbooks, you don't have to be a programmer. So that's the thing, to not be, even though we say it's a programmable automation world, recognize that not every single user of that automation has to be a programmer to take advantage of it. But behind the scenes, there has to be this software kind of thinking in terms of how you manage it, do role-based control, do updates, just all the things that you do with software. In general, what we hear when we talk to our customers is that the biggest challenges around all these transitions for IT ops are not the tools. There's lots of great tools. There's lots of technologies. The open source community has been, just a source of all kinds of innovation. But it's about people and process and operational silos. So that's really, something to think about, is how do we break down those silos? How do we get more consistent processes and tooling and skills across the environment? Because remember, as we go more hybrid, there will be less on-prem resources. And those same operators that maybe today are skilled at on-prem and are, the command line heroes, they're going to need to grow with the organization. They're going to need to be able to add value across this hybrid environment. And so getting those people, familiar with, even how do I manage RHEL, across on-prem and public, and what are the tools, and, what's the life cycle around that, and, getting them aware of the software as a service-based offerings and the automation, that consistent automation language. I mean, I think there's a lot that can be started today just from a skills and development point of view that will help teams evolve over time. And analytics. I love this slide. So, you know, when you asked, what we have, 451 asked 857 IT decision makers, and they said their number one, you know, their top priorities for in 2018, business intelligence and analytics comes up, you know, far and away, and then variants of that, machine learning, AI, and big data. And my friend Matt Eastwood at IDC just tweeted that in the next couple of years, they expect that something like 50% of IT ops will be influenced by AI and analytics. It turns out IT ops is one of the first really big use cases for a lot of these analytics. Because think about it, you generate so much data, right? There's logs, there's data, there's performance, there's metrics, there's so much data out there. And then you've got all the stuff coming in from the cloud services and the costs. So we got lots of data. We got, you know, we're drowning in data. How many times have you had to just like sit there and plod through log files trying to find a problem, right? It's not going to scale. So being able to have the tools that can take all that rich data and really make it actionable is going to be important. And one of the big things that, you know, this new generation of technology does is that it moves you from having to look for the log, you know, and doing a search, to really starting to abstract it and look for patterns and say, when I see these patterns of events and data, what does that mean? You know, does this mean that something is, you know, we rolled out some new application, you know, online, and things are spiking like crazy, and we better, you know, get all hands on deck to scale stuff? Does it mean that something got misconfigured? Does it mean that there's a security event? I mean, but looking at it at sort of a pattern level, I think is going to be really important and going to make things more efficient too. So here's the future that we're looking at. Lots of data, monitoring, alert, whatever it is. AI looking at it, applying business rules to it. That's the other piece we didn't talk about too much, but as you abstract everything up, you really want to align it with business policy and business rules. You know, traditionally, that's kind of meant, like in a cloud self-service world, it may mean that you had to go into some, you know, Ruby-based system and sort of hard program in quotas and thresholds that approximated business rules. One of the things we're looking at, and there's actually a sort of a concept demo down on the show floor, we're taking the OpenShift service catalog, we're integrating it with the Red Hat Decision Manager, which is our business rules engine, and creating a very developer-friendly service catalog that can embed the business logic and the business rules around the self-service environment. So we kind of see all these different interesting technologies coming together in ways that make IT operations much more policy-driven and automated and analytic-driven. And then, you know, pushing that all down, of course, into automations. So that's what you're going to see a lot of from us over the next couple of years. And I think, you know, as you think about your organization and where you are, it's kind of each of these things. You got to have great information and data. You got to have really good analytics and business rules. And then you've got to, you know, drive that into repeatable, scalable automation. So I like to talk about it. You know, we have this notion of sort of, you know, today's cars. If you think about cars, so you got these, you know, high-tech cars with lots of instrumentation and data in them, and then you've got self-driving cars that have even more cool stuff, and then you've got this idea of convoys and trying to, you know, sort of keep the convoys going. So we sort of look at it and say, you know, every system is going to have instrumentation. Every system is probably going to have some level of very specific device, you know, configuration control for it. But the challenge going forward is how you keep the whole convoy going. So, you know, whether it's Kubernetes and all the great stuff that's in as part of that container platform, that still has to talk to the rest of the world, right? It has to talk to databases. It has to talk to VMs. We obviously have operating systems going through the whole thing. We've got public clouds. And then we've got all those other, you know, really important IT operations systems, whether it's governance and rules and service catalogs, whether it's compliance reporting and root cause or capacity optimization or cost optimization. And so, you know, part of this automation is not only making sure you can configure and provision and secure and protect, but that also all that data about usage and change, all that is automated and sent to wherever it needs to go, whether it's compliance reporting or service catalogs or CMDBs or whatever you're kind of doing on the more administrative operations side. And again, when I talk about automation, Ansible actually has modules that do those kind of things, that will send data, to ServiceNow to create a ticket or to populate a CMDB, just as an example. So, in an API-driven world, it's going to be really interesting how you can mix and match all these different things to create this whole analytic and automated-driven profile. But it's going to be easier if you've got consistent automation and analytics across the environment. So I want to be mindful of your time here, so I'm going to kind of cut to the chase pretty quick. But we have customers who talk to us about how do I ensure multi-cloud portability, how do I drive these new roles through the organization, and how do I take advantage of automation and AI ops. And I don't know if we have all the answers, but I do want to share with you, I'm just going to kind of fast forward a little bit, I want to share with you where we're going. Because we're really trying to create what we think of as a hybrid management architecture for a hybrid world. And that's going to be data intensive, automated, and optimized for the needs of different personas. And that's what I really want to talk about just before I wrap up here. So, in a traditional IT ops world, there was sysadmins, cloud admins, we kind of all know that role. And a lot of particularly first-generation cloud management tools and on-prem tools, very focused on that persona. That persona continues to be important, really important. But we've got all these other people with their hands in the pot, right? We've got developers and architects and business people and network admins. And we need to have tools that, again, can share the same sort of automation platform and analytics and data modeling and predictive analytics, but we've got to serve it up to them in ways that they can consume, particularly if we remember that some of those developers are going to be less and less sophisticated in the way they want to operate with systems. At the same time, we've got the on-prem world, which generally it changes, obviously, but the rate and pace of change is slower than what you see in a public cloud or a SaaS model. And the kind of data that's generated may be a little different, and even the operational questions may be different. On-prem, you're worried about capacity, right? You can have the slickest, automated, containerized everything, but if you don't actually have the physical systems that it runs on and you haven't procured them and provisioned them, you're going to have trouble. In the public cloud, you don't worry about that so much, but you worry a lot about cost, right? You worry about how much, the meter's running at Amazon and how much is this costing me. And obviously for both of them, you're concerned about security and some other operational needs. But it's balancing that. So we're really thinking hard about how do you think about different personas and how you think about these needs in a hybrid world. And what we're moving to, I'm going to keep going a little bit here, what we're trying to move to is, again, different ways of serving up these capabilities. So, like I mentioned, we have this concept of an integrated service catalog that we're demonstrating downstairs. And what we're trying to get away from this, where, you make a developer, assuming that they're somewhat knowledgeable about IT, and they go all different places to get all kinds of resources. And what we're showing downstairs is a hybrid service catalog with an embedded business rules engine that's really designed, to not make you have to hard code in Ruby business rules, but to actually have a very, business-friendly decision rules engine framing where you can set multi-tier approvals, you can integrate it with Slack or email or whatever kind of system you want. You can set automatic approvals, maybe for certain kinds of thresholds, you can set quotas. And so bringing that into a consistent way so that whether a developer or business person is talking to OpenShift, talking to on-prem, or going through Ansible and Tower and the APIs with Tower, or going to public cloud services, you can have that consistent user interface. And we'll be looking for folks to be part of early access programs in the fall. So if that's something that sounds interesting, keep it in mind and talk to your account teams. And then we're also looking at much more use of a SaaS environment. For those of you who know particularly cloud forms and to a certain extent satellite, well, you're going to start to see It's a real modularization of some of those older products, which are kind of monolithic today, and are, they can't evolve as fast as we want them to. So we're sort of taking cloud forms and satellite and looking at what are the functional modules, and how can we kind of break them up, make them API enabled, and the ones that are going to do better in the cloud, let's put them in the cloud. Let's make them SaaS offerings. So you're going to start to see a series of software as a service offerings coming out, kind of extending that insights platform, adding, more cost analysis, more governance, discovery, while still supporting on-prem, because we know we got a lot of on-prem customers that aren't going anywhere. So you're going to see really continued support for our on-prem environment, but you're going to see more analytics than maybe we've been able to do so far coming through a software as a service model. And then, really strong commitment to API integrations, which means you can integrate them with Tower, you can integrate them with any, really any automation system that has an API interface. So that's where we're going, is SaaS-enabled analytics and automation, as well as on-prem. And it's a real expansion, but it's also going to create an environment that's much more flexible. And I think, as you think about IT ops, whether you want our stuff or anybody else's, that's where you're going to go, right? Software programmability, analytics, hybrid operational models, and kind of a skills transformation that brings your teams along with it. So it's going to be a busy couple of years, right? This stuff doesn't slow down. Again, what we're trying to do is really eliminate the silos, expand the use of APIs, accelerate the pace of innovation, and create this very modular, consumable approach, so that rather than, you look at us and say, well, I like CloudForm, I like this piece of CloudForms, but I don't really want the 5 other things it does. In a modular world, you'll be able to pick and choose. You'll be able to say, gee, I really like that service catalog, give me some of that. Give me some of that cost analysis or performance analytics, but you know what? We got some other things over here from third parties that we would rather plug in and we don't really want from you. And that's going to be okay. So that's where we're trying to go, is more flexibility and a lot faster innovation by taking advantage of DevOps and containers and digital transformation kind of our own management portfolio. We really have, the success of Insights has really, taught us a lot about how to protect the information and make it accessible, and the success of Ansible, has just given us a huge belief in this common automation profile and programmability and the way that IT operations works. So thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.